Hello, my name is Tasneem Abdul Majeed from PL4246 Networks in Psychology. Today I'll be presenting my group's project on Singaporean undergraduates' perceptions of autism spectrum disorder. We use a lexical-semantic network analysis for our project. What do Bill Gates, Temple Grandin, and Elon Musk all have in common? You guessed it, they are highly successful autistic adults who experience a university education. And they are certainly not alone. Following the implementation of the Individuals with Disabilities Act, more and more autistic students have gained access to a university education. However, integrating an autistic student into a mainstream tertiary education classroom is easier said than done. Unfortunately, due to autistic students' hallmark impairments in social communication, many of them are at risk of social exclusion, as seen from these stats. And the social phenomenon is not just limited to the West. Our local autistic students studying in autonomous use face the same problems of poor social acceptance, as seen from this quote. However, there's some potential for this to change. A widely discussed method to improve the social inclusion of autistic students, as presented in a paper by Matthews 2015, entails changing the attitudes of their neurotypical peers. However, this entails a more complete understanding of college-age students' perceptions of ASD. Hence, our study aims to fill the knowledge gap in the local context by examining Singaporean undergraduates' perceptions of ASD using a lexical-semantic network analysis. Our study consists of three components. Number one, a free association task on Qualtrics. Two, the generation and analysis of a lexical-semantic network on RStudio. And finally, the contextualization of numerical findings. Our ensemble comprised of 30 psychology undergraduates from the National University of Singapore, recruited through convenient sampling. Here's a photograph of our recruitment message uploaded to our student portal by my teammate. First component of our study was a free association task conducted on Qualtrics. Perceptions of autism were operationalized through participants' generated associative responses to the keyword autism. First, participants were asked to generate 3 words to the keyword autism, seen here, and then told to generate another 3 associative words for each of the 3 initially provided words, right here, producing 12 words in total. All data was conducted anonymously. The reason why we chose to utilize a free association task is because participants' responses are cued with minimal relevant contextual cues. This circumvented the limitations of the conventional survey methodology used in existing studies, seen right here. Participants' responses were converted into an edge list consisting of 2 column matrices, with one section of the list containing all keywords in response to autism, right here. For example, autism condition and autism slow, and the other containing subsequent responses to the originally cued words, for example, condition mental, slow judge. The edge list was transformed into a free association network right here using the iGraph package in RStudio. The nodes in this network, the circles, represent the response words, while the edges, the lines connecting the circles, represent the semantic relationship between the words. Unfortunately, the original network generated by RStudio was densely connected, and the overall structure of the network is invisible. Hence, to get a visualization of the overall structure of the network, I removed the keyword autism from the network and the name of the nodes to generate this skeleton right here. And the reason why we chose a network analysis over statistical analysis was because networks of word associations have been established to be a strong representation of encoded semantic memory, particularly how information is organized in the mental lexicon. Hence, the network generated is likely to be a reliable reflection of undergraduates' day-to-day thought processes, for example, their prejudices, including their perceptions of ASD. And if we look at the network right here, which is based on an existing autism association task with a US sample, we can see how autism is predominantly characterized by negative concepts such as illness, mental, and negative emotions such as fear. Generating our network, 2 micro-level centrality measures were used to analyze the network, specifically degree and local clustering coefficient. Closest centrality was also calculated, but subsequently discarded due to the lack of relevance to the research question. The first micro-level centrality measure calculated was degree. The degree of the node refers to the number of connections it has to other nodes in the network. The degree of each node in our network was calculated and tabulated using RStudio's degree function, using the above codes, and subsequently converted into an Excel CSV file right here. As seen from the Excel tables on the right side of the screen, the degree distribution of the network is unequal, with few nodes such as disorder and spectrum having extremely high degrees in the network in 2 digits, while the majority of the nodes as seen from this large list here have low degrees, for example, 1 to 2 connections only. This unequal degree distribution can be attributed to the nature of our sample. The high degrees of spectrum and disorder are easily attributed to the high shared occurrence with the word autism in clinical texts frequently consumed by psychology students, which make up our entire sample. As seen from this large list of psychological texts with the three words autism spectrum disorder. In the network, they are the nodes with the most number of connections as indicated by the red arrows right here and right here. As for their perceptions of autism, the high degrees of different, slow, and mental present negative characteristics as being core to participants' concept of autism, likely explained by the culturally bound outgroup tendency as seen from the node different, and assumptions of incompetency as seen from the node slow, and poor functionality as seen from the word mental towards persons with disabilities in Singapore. Ultimately, these results point to undergraduates' overwhelmingly negative perceptions of autism, which is consistent with existing studies measuring perceptions of ASD in college students. To modify students' negative perceptions of autism, Payne and Wood suggested implementing university-wide disability education. For example, educational posters that highlight successful autistic people who experienced a university education. And in addition, short courses on disability could be helpful in correcting negative myths and misconceptions surrounding autism. The second micro-level centrality measure calculated was the local clustering coefficient. The local clustering coefficient, or CI, measures the connectedness of the neighbors of a node, reflecting the flow of information through and around a node. A node's LCC can range from 1, high interconnectivity, to 0, low interconnectivity. The local clustering coefficient of each node in our network was calculated and tabulated using RStudio's transitivity function, seen right here, and subsequently converted into an Excel CSV file. As with the degree values, the distribution of LCC values is largely unequal. A few nodes with extremely high LCC values, and the majority of the nodes having low LCC values, as seen from this long list right here full of zeros. The nodes with the highest LCC values were found to be extract terms such as extraordinary and health and challenge. In a network, they're likely to be the nodes that are highly interconnected, but also have highly connected neighbors. It's indicated in the red arrow above. For example, this one. According to a paper by Ying, 2009, what this means is that the activation of these terms are likely to be limited to the interconnected neighborhood, leading to less and slower retrieval. On the other hand, nodes with lower LCC values, for example, insult, ADHD, and disability, are context-specific. In a network, they're likely to be less interconnected, and by extension, have less interconnected neighbors, seen as maybe this node right here. However, this means that there is greater activation from the neighbors back to the target word, resulting in higher and quicker retrieval. Hence, if disability education programs were to be implemented to combat the negative stigma surrounding autism among undergraduates, as mentioned a few slides ago, it will be optimal to use educational materials comprising of domain-specific terms to enhance retention and retrieval. For example, it will be beneficial to students' retention and learning by describing an autistic person using concrete terms, such as having talents in XXX areas, rather than abstract terms such as autistic people are extraordinary or brilliant. In a nutshell, this study is novel in attempting to evaluate Singaporean undergraduates' perceptions of autism using a lexical semantic network analysis. However, there are a few limitations. For example, the results may not be representative of all local undergraduates, as the sample was limited to psychology students. Secondly, participants' associative responses to autism should be interpreted with the consideration that the prototype of autism participants mentalize could vary significantly from the actual profile of an autistic student in higher education. Given that ASD is a spectrum disorder, the concept of slow and mental could have been activated based on a prototype of an individual with severe cognitive and behavioral deficits, which differs from the autistic individuals of high cognitive capacity studying in universities. Hence, future studies should couple the keyword autism with a representative corrected profile of an autistic tertiary student before collecting the associative responses. And here's an example in this slide. And with that, we've come to the end of our presentation. Thank you so much.